This is the new Golf GTI. Obviously it's not, but it is. It's a Golf GTI for people who don't want a Golf GTI. It is in fact the new 2021 Cupra Leon 300 TSI. If I sound slightly confused, that's because the car itself is slightly confused. It's a Cupra Leon, which is based on the Seat Leon, which itself is based on the VW Golf. But what's it actually like?
It's basically a slightly updated Seat Leon, but with a few major tweaks, shall we say. The most obvious being this new badge. It's very distinctive, partly because it's finished in copper, partly because your eyes are drawn to it by these leading lines on the bonnet and on the lower bumper, and partly because it looks like it was designed by a child. If I ever start my own evil megacorp, I'm definitely going to steal that. I'm also a big fan of these lights, which have a very distinctive DRL pattern. They look almost like either side of the Cupra logo, in fact, and it's been bejeweled slightly around the edges, so it looks very bling. In profile, nothing too crazy. It's a Seat Leon after all, but there are a couple of standout features at the side. These wheels are 19-inch, 1 inch bigger than you get on a Golf GTI, plus they're finished in that familiar Cupra copper color, very distinctive. I think these wheel designs aren't available in the UK at the time of doing this review. This is a European spec car, but here's hoping that Cupra actually bring it to the UK. The brakes are absolutely enormous on this car as well. 370 millimeters at the front with some Brembo brake calipers, again finished in that Cupra copper color. The car's also lower. It sits quite nicely in its stance. 25 millimeters lower at the front and 20 millimeters lower at the back. You also get a panoramic glass roof. It doesn't go all the way back, but it ends about there, and I think it's still quite a nice addition. This color, incidentally, is called petrol blue. Again, not available in the UK as far as I know, but here's hoping they bring it over here sometime soon. Little roof spoiler at the back, nice touch. And then the rear of the car is probably my favorite angle by far. I love these rear light clusters, which again mimic the Cupra logo, and you get a full width light bar at the back, which is very in keeping with VW Group's other cars. So Porsches, VWs, and now Cupras all have a very similar thing going on, and it looks tremendous. Plus, you've got these quad exhausts, which not only look good, but as I'll show you later, sound good as well.
As for practicality, you get the same 380-litre boot you get in a Golf, although here in the Cupra you also get an actual spare wheel rather than a puncture repair kit. In the cabin there's plenty of space for rear passengers with 2 USB ports, individual climate control, and good leg and headroom.
Up front, I think Cupra have done a pretty decent job with the interior. Again, this car stands out thanks to ample use of copper, in this case around the vents in the center and on the outer edges, and copper all over this steering wheel. The steering wheel itself is very interesting because you get the engine start-stop button, again, ringed in copper, and a mode button. If you push that, you can cycle between different driving modes, again, all finished in copper, and copper included on the stitching on the interior edge of the steering wheel, plus around the seats. Incidentally, one of the best things about this Cupra steering wheel is the fact that it has physical buttons on the wheel as opposed to those capacitive buttons you get on the VW Golf. So it's a much more intuitive, easy to use system. I like that. You also get some ambient lighting, in this case halfway along the doors, all the way around the dashboard and back around the other side. And they're not just there to look pretty either. These ambient lights actually illuminate to let you know when there might be someone in your blind spot, and the ones on the dashboard will flash up to let you know when you might be about to crash into someone. In terms of materials, pretty good. You get some plasticky elements. Again, that's pretty standard on most modern cars these days, but you get some faux leather on these sports seats, and on this 2-tier dashboard you have some brushed metal effect plus some leather effect finish up here as well, so it actually looks fairly premium. In terms of storage, it's not too bad actually. The door bins are a reasonable size. You get 2 cup holders of different heights in the center console, an okay amount of storage in the center compartment there, and also a dedicated place to wirelessly store and charge your mobile phone. That brings me very nicely on to the infotainment system in this car, which is not the best, shall we say. If you've watched any of my VW Group reviews over the last few months, then you know exactly how I feel about them, and I don't like them. This screen in front of you is not too bad. It shows all your driving information, and that's absolutely fine. The main culprit is this 10-inch display on the dashboard, and it's not very good, is it? One of the big issues is that it doesn't do the basics very well. The volume control, for example, isn't a simple knob. It's a strip that doesn't always work. The temperature control is also a strip which doesn't always work. And again, you can't actually see these illuminated in the dark because they're not backlit. There is some gesture control, as you've just seen right there, but when would you ever use that? To me, that's fairly pointless. And one of the most absurd things to me is the fact that a lot of these icons don't reveal themselves until you move your hand towards it. For example, if I bring up the air conditioning system, there are a row of icons along the left-hand side, and I can't work out what those are until I bring my hand close to them, and then it shows you that's for the front, that's for the rear, that's for the iClimate, whatever that is, and then you move your hand away, and that text disappears. So it's all a bit confusing. It takes a long time to get used to and can be quite infuriating. Luckily, it is all compatible with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so you don't actually have to use it as much as you might think. Right, let's get on the road. Okay, so we all know that Cupra's deal is that they're going after customers who are interested in looks and performance. We've already seen the looks, and I'll talk about performance in just a second, but before we put the hammer down, let's talk about what this car's like to drive when you're just cruising. On the whole, it's actually pretty nice. The driving position is nigh on perfect. There's plenty of adjustability in the seats, which are electrically operated, of course. There's lumbar support, and everything just feels pretty comfortable. The seats themselves are nice as well. There's a good blend of comfort and support, and I don't think anyone is going to find any problem with this car from an ergonomic standpoint. Whether you're 4'11" or 6'5", you're going to get on with this car. High up on my list of first impressions, though, is that this isn't the quietest car in the world. It's running on 19-inch alloys and fairly wide tires, and I am getting a fair amount of road noise coming up into the cabin. It's not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination, but yep, you can hear that connection between rubber and tarmac. And after a long journey, especially on the motorway, for some people, that might get slightly tiresome. As for the ride comfort, well, it's pretty good. I'm on a fairly bumpy stretch of road right here, and it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. However, this car isn't fitted with the optional DCC, dynamic chassis control, which allows you to choose from 15 different levels of ride comfort, all the way from super soft to super hard. This is the standard suspension, which means that you get what you get. And while it's absolutely fine, if I was going to buy this car, I would definitely go for the DCC. As I kind of alluded to earlier, there are several different drive modes in this car. You can cycle between them using the button on the steering wheel. So there's road, there's sport, and there's Cupra being the most hardcore. Let's wind it up into Cupra mode now. This car uses a 2-litre TSI engine, the same engine you find in a lot of VW Group products. So it's the same engine you find in the Golf GTI, for example, except in the basic GTI, it generates 245 PS. In this, you get 300 PS, so a lot more punch for your money. Of course, there are other versions of the GTI, like the Club Sport, which also has 300 horsepower, and the Golf R, which has 320 horsepower, but 300 in this thing, I mean, it's ample, isn't it? You also get a very healthy 400 Newton meters of torque, and according to Cupra, that's good for 0 to 62 in 5.7 seconds, but occasionally these manufacturers can underestimate the performance of their cars, shall we say. So why don't we find out what this thing actually does? Okay, I've got my race box. It is connected. Let's whack it into Cupra mode. Traction off, foot on the brake. Send. There we go. A little bit of wheel spin. And we are at 100 kph. That's 0 to 62 in 5.6 seconds. So a tenth quicker than Cupra say it is. But look at, you can see there's water. This car is exceeding their expectations even in the wet. I reckon this car can probably go half a second quicker than this. 0 to 62 in 5 and a bit seconds.
In fact, later in the day, I managed a 5.45 and in the dry, a 5.18, which is mightily impressive for a front-wheel drive car. In fact, it's up there with the fastest accelerating front-wheel drive cars on the market.
It's definitely got more than 300 horsepower. Come on. The acceleration is super impressive. It's so aggressive, you put your foot down and it teleports in a straight line, basically.
The acceleration and traction is so good that despite being front-wheel drive, it actually feels more like an all-wheel drive car. There is the merest hint of torque steer and tiny amounts of wheel spin, but there aren't many front-wheel drive hot hatches with this much power that can put their power down this efficiently. It's really something.
The gearbox, as you might expect, is the 7-speed DSG unit that you get in pretty much every Volkswagen product. And I've got to say, it's super impressive in terms of the way that it rifles up and down the gearbox. Very, very fast shifting and also very responsive. A lot of cars are very shy about shifting down and giving you all the revs, but in this, there's no problem with that whatsoever. It doesn't matter whether you want second gear or first gear coming into a low hairpin like this. It downshifts, the exhaust pop, and off she goes. Really good gearbox. There is one criticism, if I may, and that is that it doesn't lock the gear in. It seems to want to upshift when you approach the red line. Look at this. It upshifts. And I would have preferred the car to actually bounce off the rev limiter so that I feel as if I'm more involved in the experience. I don't want to feel like, you know, I'm just a passenger along for the ride. So let me fail. Let me bounce off the rev limiter and learn from my mistake and then shift up at the appropriate time. Just going back to the sound of that exhaust for a second. You get the pops and the bangs. It's not antisocial by any stretch of the imagination, but there are enough noises coming out the back end to remind you this is a performance car. Whew, it's quick. Let's see what these brakes are saying now. Here we go into a corner. No drama whatsoever. It slows down just as nicely as it goes, to be honest. 370mm discs on the front with those Brembo 4-pots. Very, very capable stopper, the Cupra Leon. Really impressive. How does it handle through the corners? There's a little bit of body roll. There's some lateral movement in there, but it's not alarming in the slightest. It settles down quite nicely and there's plenty of grip and also lots of feedback through the steering wheel. You know when you're about to exceed the grip limits, and that gives you just all the confidence you need to push on. Here's a tighter corner now. Yeah, tiny bit of understeer, and you can get on the power super early and trust that it will deploy all of that power.
At the time of doing this review, the top spec Cupra Leon will set you back £36,760. A Golf GTI Club Sport with the same power costs £37,230 and comes with smaller wheels. Also, a lot of the options on that Golf cost more than the options on the Leon. If you're looking for better value, the Cupra might be where it's at.
You know what? Above anything else, it just feels fun. It's playful enough to make you feel like you're part of the experience. It's an engaging, charming car, the Cupra Leon. I like driving it. I would definitely pick this above the standard entry-level Golf GTI. It's a tiny bit more expensive, but you get a lot more for your money. A hell of a lot more performance, more engaging handling, and also, I don't know, maybe the brand is slightly more interesting in this day and age as well. You're not joining the rank and file of people who end up buying a Golf GTI when they want a really good hot hatch. If you want to stand out from the crowd, if you want a car that is enjoyable to drive, if you want a car that is fast and fun, then maybe this is the Golf GTI you're looking for. And copper all over this. I forgot what you call this for a second. Steering wheel.